Hi guys, I am gonna take some time and compile for you kind of a series of just little vlog clips to kind of be my response to the Knit Life survey that's going on right now. It's hashtag Knit Life survey. I see it on Instagram, I see it on some of the podcasts, various different places, and I really wanted to participate in that. It's a series of 25 questions, and instead of sitting down and doing a video where I answer all 25 questions in one video, which I was thinking about doing that, I was watching Susan from the KNITLIFE podcast and I really love the way that she did it. But between my podcast and then, you know, dyeing yarn for the shop update and other things that I have going on, having another video like that in that length was gonna be a little tricky. So I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to try and do little clips here and there until I compiled all responses to the questions. So come along with me. I am going to make this my Knit Life survey vlog. It's Saturday right now. I have a morning to myself. My husband actually had to do field work at the baseball field where he coaches baseball. So he took Angus with him to do some field maintenance. So I have a few hours this morning to myself to kind of get some things done. I have some errands to run. I have some things that I need to do out in the dye studio. So anyway, I wanted to use this as an opportunity to start this vlog, I guess you could say. So I'm just gonna sit down right now and answer the first couple of questions, but I'm really excited to share with you guys my Knit Life survey. Okay, so the first question on the Knit Life survey is, what sparked your interest in knitting? Well, I had a friend in college. I went to school for education, and I had this friend who took a class with me, and I went over to her house. We kind of became like friends, and we hung out. And I was in her home, and over by her chair in her living room was this basket of yarn and knitting needles. It was a knitting basket, and it was full of various different things. And at the time, I kind of looked at that, and I almost thought maybe it was like decor. I don't know, like a kitschy kind of like thing to have in your house, just to be like decoration. And so I asked her about it, and I was like, so what's the deal with the yarn? And she's like, well, I knit. It's like a hobby of mine. And she just had, it was like what she was working on, I think, was maybe like a scarf or something pretty simple and straight needles, nothing crazy. I didn't see any cable needle or circular needles or anything like that. So I kind of picked her brain about it, and I said, well, like, what are you knitting? Like, you knit? Like, that seems, you know, unusual. I've never met anybody my age who knits. And to me, it was a completely foreign hobby. And this was when I was in college. So I think this was probably, I don't know, maybe I was 21, not even, I think I was 20. I wasn't even 21 yet, yeah. And so she was telling me about it, and I thought it was so cool that somebody my age, young, was knitting. And I don't know, there was just something about it that I thought was really unique and cool, and I wanted to be involved in that. I wanted to learn how to do that. I was thinking that that would be such a cool hobby to know how to do, something unique and different for a person of my age at the time. But that didn't start my knitting career at that point. It took me some time before I actually decided I was gonna start knitting. And it actually was not until my husband and I met, a couple of years after actually, when it really started. And that kind of leads me to the second question, how and when did you learn to knit? So I met my husband in 2006, and we got engaged early 2007. And then I remember communicating to him, like, through the process of like our getting to know one another. Like, one of the things I would mention was that I really wanted to learn how to knit. I had this friend in college who knew how to knit, and I really wanted to learn how. I remember we were in Laguna Beach, California, and we were strolling through some of the shops down there, and there was this little like kitschy knick-knack shop, and it was really cute, and it had this like knitting kit that you could buy, and it was like a beginner's knitting kit. And what was really cool about it was that the skein of yarn, which was like one of those long skeins of yarn like that you buy at Michael's, just like an acrylic yarn, was stuffed inside of a Slurpee cup. So a Slurpee, if you're not familiar with a Slurpee, it's something that they have here in the United States, and you buy them at 7-Eleven, which is a convenience store, and they come in these like tall plastic cups, and they have these domed lids with a hole where you put your straw, and it's like a frozen like drink, pretty much. It's really sweet and sugary, and being a child of the early 90s, I grew up, you know, drinking Slurpees. And so anyway, the yarn came in this like Slurpee cup. It had the domed lid on it, and sticking out of the hole in the top where the straw would go were 2 wooden straight needles. And then inside the Slurpee cup was the instructions to knit. I think it was just like a garter scarf, something like that. And I remember seeing this in Laguna Beach with him and telling him like, I really want to learn how to knit. Like that to me was so cool. I was like, I want that to learn how to knit. That's gonna like, you know, I think that would be really cool. Like it was so simple, just this like really simple acrylic yarn. And the way it was, you know, organized in this little Slurpee cup, I thought was really, I don't know, kind of cool just because it was a Slurpee cup. So I just mentioned it in passing. And I think there were times after that where I had seen things and I thought like, oh, it'd be so cool to learn how to knit, like just hint, hint. But I wasn't even really asking for anything. I just kept saying it, almost like if I just said it enough, then eventually I would just get the nerve up to go and teach myself how to knit. Now this was like pre-YouTube, pre-Pinterest, pre-like, well at the time I didn't know what Ravelry was because I wasn't part of the community at all. So when you wanted to learn a new craft, it wasn't like you just go on YouTube and you learn a new craft. It was like you kind of had to dedicate yourself to like really picking it up, whether it was taking a class or you know, really researching it online, finding tutorials, written tutorials, reading books, what have you. So anyway, the following Christmas comes along and Brandon for Christmas gives me that knitting kit with the Slurpee cup and everything. So apparently he had gone back and purchased it and saved it for Christmas. And I remember we were in Utah visiting family that Christmas, and that was just the coolest gift. It was this ball of yarn in a Slurpee cup, and I was so excited to learn how to knit. I immediately taught myself the knit stitch and the purl stitch, but I remember the knit stitch was what I really picked up first. I think that's pretty common. And I was knitting along this just garter stitch piece of fabric. It wasn't anything in particular. I know that the pattern was for like a garter scarf, but I didn't care. I just wanted to learn how to knit. And there was a used bookstore in the town that we were staying in, and I picked up a Knitting for Dummies and maybe one other book. But the Knitting for Dummies book was the #1 source that taught me how to knit. It was so easy, so clear cut, and so black and white, like literally and figuratively. Everything was just very clear. I like dog-eared and underlined and highlighted the pages of this book, and it was essentially the one thing that taught me how to knit was Knitting for Dummies, that yellow and black book that we've probably all seen. I wish I still had my copy with me, but I gave it to my mom when I taught her how to knit, so she has it on her shelf someplace. But it's really funny. It looks like a textbook from a college class, the way I've written notes and highlighted things. But it makes me feel proud to know that I taught myself to knit from a book. And later on down the line, it was from like blogs. And then some, I mean, very, very few. I don't even think I ever really used YouTube in the process of teaching myself to knit. I use it now when I'm trying to learn different techniques, but when it came to teaching myself the basics of knitting, I didn't use YouTube. Yeah, it was pretty much mainly just the books and then blog posts that may have taught tutorials or techniques or whatever. So that was kind of how, at that point, I learned to knit. It was completely self-taught, and I credit everything that I do in the realm of knitting really to that Slurpee cup with the skein of yarn in it that my husband gave me. Sometimes I'll be sitting working on some project or dyeing yarn or doing something related to the fiber and the knitting, and I tell him, it's like, you know, this is all you. Like, you pushed me to do this, and I thank him for that. I think it was kind of a really cool way for him to open the door into this like world that has become, you know, my life, and I love it. So that's pretty much how I learned to knit, why I learned to knit. And I remember it was so, like, it was one of those jumping off points where as soon as I like got that initial kit, it was like I needed all of the things. I bought so many needles right after that, all the little tools and doodads that you need. I remember I bought this pattern at a little knitting store in the city that we were in that Christmas for like a pair of really long Scandinavian style Fair Isle socks, and I bought the yarn for it. Like, I was ready to like start knitting Fair Isle, and I have yet to complete a Fair Isle project. So I thought that was kind of crazy, but that's just like what happens. It's like I go big or go home. But yeah, so that's it. That's how I learned to knit. I was completely self-taught, but it was because my husband gave me a skein of yarn in a Slurpee cup. out here in my dyeing studio space, and I'm actually just packaging some orders from a small pop-up shop update that we just had, and I figured I would take a minute to do this and also to answer some of the Knit Life survey questions. So why don't you join me? Okay, so the next question, what is your favorite cast-on method? It's actually funny because I don't think that I have a favorite cast-on method, only because I pretty much use a long tail cast on. That's just my go-to cast on when I'm knitting a project or starting a project. I don't tend to just switch between cast on methods unless the pattern specifically calls for a particular cast on method. I think that a tubular cast on is probably my least favorite, though. I can tell you that, and the only reason why that's the case is because I feel like it takes forever to accomplish a tubular cast on. You have to, you know, cast on in this like wonky way where your stitches are all up and down and they look really strange, and then you have to come back and knit one, slip one, and then you have to come back and knit one, it's just like this whole big long drawn out process, and that's just to set up the whole cast on, and then you have to join in the round, and then you have to go back and seam up the little like couple of rows, I guess, that are created from a tubular cast on. I don't know, it's just like, it's my least favorite cast on. But if I'm gonna start a project, my go-to cast on is the long tail cast on, and that's because that's what I learned, and that's what I'm most comfortable with. And so and when I say that's what I learned, that's what I first started doing when I first learned to knit, and so I think that that's probably my favorite cast on method. The next one is, what is my favorite knitting design element? And it talks about brioche, lace, cables, what have you. Definitely, if there's going to be a design element to the fabric, something other than just a basic stitch pattern, it's cables for sure. I have yet to pick up brioche. I think it looks pretty, and I think it's you know, probably a really fun thing to learn how to do, but it's just not very practical for where I live. It's very moderately temperate here, I guess. It's a, you know, I live in the desert, so it's not something that I wouldn't need that cushy squishy fabric that comes with brioche. So I think that's probably right now my least favorite design element, not because of the way it looks, but because it's really not something that I'm interested in working up practically, or for its practicality, if that makes any sense. But definitely cables. I think cables just look so classic, and I am a sucker for anything that looks classic, and I think that's why I've really developed a love affair with Brooklyn Tweed, is because they have such really classic designs, and cables are really popular in all of their designs. So yeah, definitely cabling. Okay, the next question is, what is your favorite project you have ever knit? And this is a really this was hard for me at first when I thought about it, and then it was really easy for me when it occurred to me what this was. Now, this was a gifted project. This is something I knit for my dad for Christmas, and the reason it's my favorite project is because it was such a challenging piece to work on at the time. Excuse me, at the time that I made it. It was definitely not completely in my skill set at that time, and so there were lots of skills that were involved in this project. And it is this hat, and I'm thinking about it right now, and I can't think of the pattern off the top of my head, but if I can think of it, I'll patch it in. But it is this hat, and it is like a newsboy cap. It had an interfacing in the bill to give it structure. It had lots and lots of shaping and picking up stitches. It was just a really incredible knit, and I loved the way it came out. It was one of those things that was finished kind of like in the nick of time. My dad wore it all the time, but what's crazy is he just mentioned it to me the other day that he can't find it. He's really sad about it because he wore it all the time. It was very special to him. And so I've since kind of, now that my skill set has grown and I'm a much more of a veteran knitter, I would really love to knit a hat like that again. So, but anyway, in the meantime, I think that is definitely, when I look back, my favorite knit, because it was, you know, sentimental. It was for my dad. It was a real learning experience, and it came out really well. Okay, the next question is about my Ravelry queue, and that is kind of like a whole nother conversation, but it asks, how many projects do I currently have in my Ravelry queue? And the answer to that is 2. And the reason why there's only 2 is because I went through an entire overhaul of my queue and got rid of tons of things that I knew I would never knit, or at least in the time, you get what I'm saying. I completely cleared it out because it was just overflowing with like sweaters and blankets, and not blankets, but you know, just big projects that would take me forever to accomplish in the amount of time that I'm kind of working with here. So I whittled it all down. I think I have a brioche hat by Andrea Mowry in there, because I really love the way that look. I think that's the exception to my whole brioche thing. And I can't even remember the other thing I have in there, but I know that there's 2. Ravelry, when it comes to the projects, the notebook and the projects and the queue and all of that, I really have to go in there and dedicate some time to updating it. The projects are pretty up to date, but they definitely need some work. So that's on my list of things, of all the things to do. So it's definitely to update that. And then I do have some things in my library that I need to add to my queue, that I definitely am planning on working on. So, but for right now, there's only 2 things in my queue. Next one is what's my favorite weight of yarn to work with, and that would definitely be a DK or a light worsted weight yarn. As I've mentioned before on the podcast, I have this sweet spot for knitting, which is, you know, my combination of needle size and yarn weight, and it's definitely a 6 or 7 needle and a DK to a worsted weight yarn. For whatever reason, anytime I'm working with that combination, the stitches just seem to fly and it seems effortless. So definitely DK or worsted weight yarn. Guys, I think it's been like maybe 2 weeks since I've filmed the last portion of this Knit Life survey video. I'm kind of like working on it in pieces just because I've had a lot of things going on. I am 38 weeks pregnant now, so we've been told by our doctor that it really could be at any point now, so we're just getting things done around the house, finishing those last little bits of like my to-do list. And so I have a few minutes right now and I wanted to go over some of the questions that are on the Knit Life survey that I haven't answered yet. I'm not going to answer all of them here. I have some more that I'll answer in another video that I think I'm probably going to do today, but I'm going to do just a few of these right now. I'm actually coming to you from this is going to be our baby room, and it also serves as a place where I have my desk and some like business paperwork, drawers and things. Here, I'll give you a quick look. It's pretty simple. This is just here, let's see. So that's the baby's portion of the room over there, and then it comes around, that's our hallway, and then there's Gladys, and she's wearing all of my knitting needles. There we are. And then comes back around to where we are. We have a window right here where I'm sitting at my desk. Let's put this down there. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. It serves at 2 purposes. We only have 3 bedrooms in our home, and so we wanted to make sure that we were maximizing our space the best that we could, and I needed a place to have my desk and to have like some things that were stored nice and neatly for my business. But I have a lot of that outside in the dyeing studio in a separate section that doesn't get dyed in, I guess you could say. So that's where I'm at right now, just doing some paperwork here, but I wanted to take a minute and just share with you guys some of my answers to these questions. Okay, the first question that I'm going to answer here is number 8 on the survey. It is, what was your first knitting project? And I don't have this knitting project in hand, but I do have it on my Ravelry project page. It was pretty much, I think it was like kind of the traditional first project for any new knitter. It was a garter stitch scarf, and it did have fringe. And I remember I used Lion Brand Thick and Quick, and I made it for my mom, and it was super, super wide. I think it was like this wide, so when you would wear it, because it was such a dense fabric the way that I knit it, you would almost have to kind of curl it down. It was not unwearable, but it was pretty intense, but it was cool because it was my first project, and I was so proud of the fringe that I attached to it. And I think my little man is coming. He's gonna walk right by that door. Hi! Come here! He requested, I'm filming part of this Knit Life survey. You want to come up? He requested to watch Frosty the Snowman while I was doing this, since I was only going to be in here for a few minutes. Angus, can you say hi? Hi. What are you doing?
I'm sitting.
You're sitting?
Are
you watching Frosty the Snowman? Okay. But he likes to come in here when I'm in here because he's gotten a kick out of the crib, and because this used to be his crib, and he's in a, you know, a bigger bed now, and he comes in here and he checks it out because he knows there's a baby on the way, but I don't think he really understands what that means completely, so we'll see. See you later. Anyway, okay, so that was my first knitting project, a garter stitch scarf. I'll attach a picture here so you can see it. It's really pretty color. It's just kind of like a berry color, but it was my first project and I loved it, and my mom loved it because she knew it was my first project. So that was that, and that was probably, I think that was in 2009. I think I started knitting in 2009, so that was 9 years ago. Yeah, so that was my first project. All right, the next question was, what is the longest time you've had a half object in hibernation? And up until, well, actually, I guess that wouldn't have counted. I just ripped out some whips the other night that had been languishing for years, I mean, like a few years. And one of them that I had ripped back would have been the longest running hibernating work in progress. But I didn't have any intention on finishing it. I could have used the yarn for something else much more desirable to knit, but I do have something here that's been kind of in the works for quite some time, and I do plan on coming back to it. It's just a color work project, and it's a little bit daunting, I guess. I haven't gotten myself to a place where I really want to finish it, but it is a really beautiful color work hat called the Naletti, and I think I may have shown this on the one of the early episodes of the podcast. This is the hat here. Beautiful hat, and I do intend to finish it because I think it's gorgeous, a real classic kind of color work hat, and I love the like Aztec-y type design. And this is how far I've gotten on it here, so you can kind of see. The thing that bugs me the most about this project is how it rolls down here at the bottom, and I'm following the pattern, you know, word for word, but it still rolls at the bottom, and then you can see floats in the back. I'm not really sure how to avoid that. If you have any advice for me, you can let me know. But yeah, so that's my Naletti hat, and I love it, and I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job considering it's my first color work. This is 100% alpaca yarn. It's really beautiful yarn. I have all the little balls of it in here, but you can see they come in these little balls like this. It has a really beautiful halo. I really love it. So that is my Naletti hat. It's been sitting in this bag, languishing as a half object for the longest time. Here's my floats, since I guess it's a thing when you do color work to show off your floats. I don't know if mine are good or bad. I don't see any like puckering or anything, but who knows. So that is my first color work project. It has been languishing for a long time. I have it sitting in a little bag. It's not even in a fancy project bag. I think it's actually in the bag that my fringe supply company field bag came in. Yeah, so this is what you get your fringe supply company field bag in. I stuck it in there because I don't know, I just did. So that is my longest running half, well, it's not even real, I don't know if you would consider that half, but it's my longest running hibernating work in progress right now. So, but I love it, and I do plan on finishing it. Okay, so I'm going to combine question 10 and 11. So question 10 is, what is the largest project you have ever knit? And number 11 is, what is the worst and just overall bad, didn't work out thing you have ever knit? And for me, those two things are the same thing. I think it started in 2011, I started working on this sweater for my husband. And I can't remember the name of the sweater, to be completely honest. I'll try and find the name and I'll put it up here. I think I have a picture on my project page. But I started working on this sweater and it's knit in pieces. It took me until Angus was almost a year old, so that would have been 2015. It took me until the Christmas of 2015 to actually give it to my husband. And I finally assembled it. And you guys, like, bless his heart. The sweater looked good if you were knitting it for a giant person. And my husband is a bigger person. He's 6'5", he's not quite 200 pounds, so he's, you know, a good sized tall guy. And it was huge on him. And so at least the construction was good, but the sizing was just way off. And I think I knew that going into it. And I even tried to adjust the size by taking it in. And when you're taking in a chunky knit piece, you're gonna have lots of these like seams on the inside. It's just really ugly. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you kind of what I mean by the seams on the inside when I was trying to take it in. And then I'm gonna put it on for you and you can kind of get an idea of exactly how huge this is. So this is the fabric that was created from the cardigan. So this is just using a Patton's classic wool roving to say, kind of to be more frugal, because it called for a Debbie Bliss roving style yarn, and I just at the time I didn't want to drop that much money on my first cardigan sweater, and so I just went with something more budget friendly. And I love this yarn, to be completely honest with you. This thing has been rolled around in a basket, stored, and it still looks really great. So I love Patton's classic roving. But anyway, that's the fabric. So you can see that it's, you know, it's a really chunky fabric here. But look at these. So I took it in on the inside because I knew it was going to be too big. But just look at this. So this right here, this is how much I tried to take it in. This right here. That's the seam right there where I attempted to take it in. So that's about a good 1.5 inches of me trying to take it in on just one side of the sweater. So this thing is huge. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this on and you can see exactly how big it is. Okay, so pardon the, you know, almost 9-month belly here, but okay, here we go. Oh my gosh, you guys, this is crazy. So let me just get this out of the way. You can see even in the mirror behind me too, just how huge. So here's the sleeves. Do you see this? This is nuts. So, I mean, and like I said, my husband is a bigger guy. He's tall. I'm 5'4", he's 6'5", but even when he has this on, it looks huge. I actually have a picture of him wearing it, and you can kind of see like how big it is. He wore it well and he managed to style it pretty well so it didn't look so big. But this is enormous. Yeah, just so big. I don't even know what to say about it. But you know what? It was my first sweater. This was my first sweater. So it was my first sweater. It was knit in pieces. I mean, it can't be all bad, right? So anyway, that's this giant sweater that I would even say would be my most disastrous knitwear project, I guess. I don't know, but that's it back there. It's just huge and it didn't work out. The one thing though, I definitely would like to recycle the yarn. I don't want to donate this. This is crazy. So the main reason I don't want to donate this is because these buttons that I got for the cardigan are actual leather buttons. So I'm gonna see, yeah, so these are actual leather buttons and they were rather pricey. So what I didn't spend on the yarn, I kind of like splurged on the buttons. So I'm planning on taking the buttons off so I can use them again later, maybe even re-knit this cardigan, obviously smaller, and then use the buttons again. But they're just such nice buttons that I wouldn't want to just donate the sweater because who knows, I don't know, I guess that's kind of crazy. But I want to recycle the yarn or do something with this. I don't know. But I love the buttons. So the buttons were kind of like my favorite part of the whole thing. Okay, question 16. What is the oldest yarn in your stash? I can actually take you and show you that right now. We're gonna go out here in the hallway where I have my yarn. So this is like where I kind of, my yarn stash. My husband built this for me a while ago, and it actually is written down here. I don't know if you can see that, but it's written right here, Christmas 2011. So the same year that I started work on his sweater is the year that he built this for me and gave it to me for Christmas. So this holds, I'm gonna kind of come over here and show you the whole thing. So this holds all of my yarn. I have some projects right there, some needles in these are kind of like circular knitting needles that I don't use. They're the chunky, like cheapy ones, so I just kind of keep them there. But this is where my stash is. It's not the most organized, but it is what it is. And here, right here, is the oldest yarn in my stash. And I'm gonna actually take it over here so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, so this is the oldest yarn in my stash. It is, let me see here. It is merino wool by Classic Elite Yarn. It's 100% merino wool made in Italy. 109 yards, 100 grams, 3 stitches per the inch, and on US 11 needles. It's obviously hand washed because it's it's hand wash, it's non-superwash. It says it felts beautifully, colors are resembling a painter's palette, and it's a chunky yarn. So I got this when we got married. We got married up in Poulsbo, Washington in 2010, and when we were, I think it was the day we were actually going to do our like honeymoon drive down the coast, because our honeymoon, all it consisted of was a drive, and I'm not trying to minimize it, it was amazing, but what we did was we went up through Port Angeles, Washington, and then down the Pacific coast all the way down to, we took it all the way down to Monterey. No, I think we even took it further south, and then we came home. And that was our kind of like our honeymoon. We stopped along the way at a lot of different places. It was beautiful, and this I picked up along the way. And I picked it up, I don't know if you noticed back there, but I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I have 7, 8 skeins of this. And I have no idea like what I was thinking buying 8. I almost think it came in like a package of 8 and it was priced pretty well. So it was $7.25 listed, but I think I got a pretty good deal on it. I kind of remember thinking that it was on sale, or I got like a bulk price. I'm not really sure, but I have no idea what I'm gonna do with this, because quite honestly, the colors are a little circusy for me, I guess. I don't know. I mean, they're pretty, they're beautiful together. But I really don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess the first thing that comes to mind with this, you know, kind of yarn would be like a sweater, like a chunky sweater. And I just don't know if I have the desire to have a chunky sweater with these colors. I'm really not sure. But this is the longest running yarn in my stash, and it is not even like the oldest yarn I've ever had. It's just that I tend to go through my yarn stash quite frequently. I just did it a couple days ago during one of my nesting phases, and I take yarn out that I know I'm not gonna knit with, and I donate it just because I know that yarn is a really big commodity in thrift stores. People like to go in there and get yarn, because we have a thrift store just down the road from us, and they always have a pretty decent yarn selection, and so I like to donate because I know there's people out there that would prefer to, you know, work with yarn and not have to pay the high price, but that's kind of what I do. So I haven't donated this yet though, just because it is a really nice yarn. And I don't know if maybe something down the road, maybe a blanket of some kind, but it is 100% merino and it does felt easily, so I don't know if a blanket would be the best idea. I don't know, let me know what you think. But that Classic Elite colorful merino wool is my oldest yarn stash member. Okay, the next question is, do I prefer a wood or metal needle? Quite honestly, I prefer metal needles, but not all metal needles to me are created equal. My favorite needle tip is the Addi. I think Addi, if you could take Addi and combine it with the cord of a Chiagu, that would be like my dream knitting needle. Addis are my ultimate favorite. Second are Chiagus, because even the tips of the Chiagus are really nice, and the cords are just, you can't beat the cord. I don't mind wood needles, but they have to be a really nice polished wood, kind of like the wood on like a Knit Picks needle or like a Licca needle, the real nice polished wood. Anything that's rough, like a bamboo, I can't handle it. It's far too slow for me. It drives me crazy. And I do have bamboo needles. I tend to not use them. If I have a project that requires a certain needle size and the only way I can get that size is with my bamboo needles, I usually will just go on Amazon and order another pair of needles, because I can't do it. But behind me, there's Gladys behind me, and she is actually sporting all of my metal and some of my wood needles. I keep them all hanging on her neck, because I haven't devised a better plan on how to store my circular knitting needles, so she's kind of taking care of that for me. I know it's kind of a hot mess, but don't judge me. That's just what works for me right now. What can I say? Okay, so I'm taking these off as I go, and the next one I have here is what is my favorite color? Up until, I want to say like a year ago, I think I would say my favorite color was green, only because that was my default response. It was always green, because I love green. But I think when I really get down to it, my real favorite color, something I gravitate towards in clothing, or just that appeals to me all the time when I see it, is like a nice deep aubergine. And the best example I have of that right now is from my stash, and it's just this big ball of Woolies Thick and Quick by Lion Brand. And this is in the aubergine colorway, and I love it. I actually started knitting a sweater with this a while ago. It was something I talked about on the podcast, some of the first episodes, but I frogged it and I saved all the yarn. But this is just a new ball. I love this color so much. I don't know what it is about it, the richness, but this is my go-to favorite color, and it is aubergine. And I feel like when it comes to dyeing yarn, I would dye all the aubergine colors because I think that they're gorgeous in all kinds of combinations, but not everybody loves it as much as I do, so I have to hold back. But aubergine is my favorite color. One question, are you a gifty knitter or a selfish knitter? In reality, I am a selfish knitter. I prefer to knit things for myself. I am the first person I think about when I see yarn and projects. I think about how I would like them. But I would like to be a better gifty knitter because I love giving people things that I've knit for them. It's such an amazing feeling of accomplishment, and it's a really loving way to show, you know, your affection for somebody and that you care for them, is to make them something with your own hands. And so all of the reasons why we knit for other people and give to other people, I love those feelings and those reasons. But really when it comes down to it, when I see a yarn or I see a pattern, it's usually because I would like to have that item for myself. And I'm okay with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a selfish knitter. We work really hard on this stuff, and to be completely honest, there aren't very many people in our lives that are knit-worthy, you know, that you would really want to spend that kind of time. At least not in my life, I guess. I find my family and my dearest friends to be the most knit-worthy people in my life. There's not a whole lot of people that I'm gonna just drop everything and knit, you know, a pair of socks for. I don't know what that makes me, if that makes me selfish in general, and I'm not a selfish person, but that's just the way I am. What is your dream knitting retreat? This is number 15. What is your dream knitting retreat or fiber festival to attend? And that would be Eden Yarn Festival. I would love to go to Edinburgh and see Scotland. I have a lot of like ancestry that goes back to the Highlands of Scotland, and I would love to be there and do those kinds of historical tours, cultural tours, kind of learn a little bit more about my ancestors, and then also to go for the Eden Yarn Festival, because that would just be amazing. It was definitely not on the docket this year after we found out we were gonna have a baby, but it is on the docket for either next year or the following year. Yeah, it's definitely a dream for me. I would love to go. Okay, what is your favorite type of fiber to work with? This is super easy for me. You know, out of all of the beautiful hand-dyed yarn, sock yarn, and all of that that's out there that I produce and put in my shop, I think my favorite, and I don't know if this is, I don't know if what this means, but my favorite kind of yarn to work with, the feel in my hands is, I guess the best actual example to give you would be Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool. And I'm not saying Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool is my favorite yarn to work with, but it's the rustic nature of that yarn. It's the coarse kind of hand that it has. And it's not necessarily the most, you know, next to skin wearing fiber, because it does have a raw kind of feel to it, a real rustic feel to it. But when it comes to working with the yarn, that's what I prefer. When it comes to working with sock yarn, I really prefer a 75-25 or an 80-20. I love 80-20 sock yarns with a 2-ply twist. That's my kind of like my go-to favorite for the look of the yarn, the plumpness of the yarn when you knit with it for socks. 75-25 for everything else in that department, you know, with a fingering weight yarn or even a DK weight yarn. But I think the tops for me is 100% non-superwash wool. Not even necessarily merino. I kind of prefer it not to be merino when it's 100%, because I like that rustic hardy nature to it. So this is a skein actually of Fisherman's Wool that I dyed up a long time ago when I first started dyeing yarn. I just kind of over dyed it. It was already kind of a marled skein, so you can see that there's other kind of contrasting colors coming through, but I just dyed over it. But this is just an example of what I love in a good yarn. It's 100% wool. It's really nice and rustic and hardy. When I'm knitting with it, it's grippy. I can hold on to it. It slides over my metal needles really nicely. I don't know, I feel like it's my favorite. And so that's kind of my go-to. I would like to, there's a worsted weight base that I carry in the shop, which is a merino base. It's 100% non-superwash merino, and I love it. It is a more rustic merino because it's non-superwash, so you don't have that real slippery feeling that a superwash yarn carries. So I really love that base, which is why I adopted it. But I think ultimately 100% non-superwashed wool, and it doesn't have to be from some high dollar. I mean, like I've said before, Patton's Classic Wool worsted is one of my favorites. Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool is one of my favorites. Regardless of price, those are my favorites. So I would say that that's, when it comes to fiber to work with, that's my favorite. All right, guys, that's it for right now. I gotta go see my little boy. He is out there watching, like I said, Frosty the Snowman, and it's March. So I'm gonna go out there and make some lunch. Sure. And I might be back a little bit later to share with you some more of the Knit Life survey. I only have a few more questions left that I'm gonna respond to, but I gotta get this thing done because this baby's on the way. Who knows, I might have to finish it after the baby's here, but that might be a good thing too, so. All right, guys, I'll see you later. Just put Angus down for his nap about 15 minutes ago, and I got myself a good cup of chai tea. These last couple of weeks I'm like not drinking any coffee just because, I don't know, I feel like maybe I should, but I'm still gonna have, like, every once in a while some chai tea just to give me a little bit of a boost, because these days I do have things I need to do and I need to have some kind of energy for those things. So anyway, I'm having a warm cup of chai tea right now, and it's really nice and cozy. It's actually kind of going in and out of like cloudy and stormy and windy outside, and like then the sun comes through and it's really beautiful outside, but it's chilly. We had a lot of rain this morning, so it's a really cozy time for Angus to be taking his nap and for me to be sitting out here taking it easy and, you know, putting my feet up, I guess you could say. I am working on Ronan's baby blanket, so kind of, it's a little bright. Let's see. I'm gonna tone that down a little bit. So I'm working on Ronan's baby blanket. I don't know if I'm gonna have it finished when he comes, but it will be finished soon and he'll still be able to love it. I love knitting it, so that's good. It's a nice, relaxing, calming knit. One of the questions on the Knit Life survey, which I have right here, one of the questions was, what is your favorite type of project to make? And it's funny because typically, like, my all-time favorite go-to project is a hat. I love working on hats. I love how simple they are, how they satisfy that instant gratification. You can do all kinds of different things with hats, so those are usually my favorite projects. But lately, since I've been working on this baby blanket and then my granny stripe blanket, I really love like knitting blankets. I love creating the texture, and then in the case of the granny stripe, I love the colors, and just knowing that you don't have to rush. It's not like, I mean, it's a blanket, it's going to take you time, so you can just kind of work on it as you go, and I think that's really comforting and relaxing. And so I've really enjoyed this blanket, so I'm loving that. And I think if I had to choose, gosh, if I had to choose just one thing to be my favorite, I would say it would be a hat. But I think it really just depends on the situation. I love knitting like domestic things, you know, the blanket and the washcloths are super simple, and I really want to knit some dish towels, which I haven't yet, so I guess I can't say that's my favorite. I do love knitting socks, but I do get second sock syndrome quite easily, so I wouldn't say they're my favorite. But I do love them when they're finished. I love having a hand knit sock, or socks, even though most of the time I just get a sock and then I have to wait for the second one. But yeah, so I would say hats, and then like blankets and domestic things like that would be my favorite projects to knit. Anything that brings me calm and quiet and peace, those are my favorite things. So in the case of being a coffee or a tea drinker, that's another like situational thing. In the morning, nothing beats a nice warm cup of coffee. I feel like, or hot cup of coffee I should say. It's just the smell, the taste, just the whole process of like making the coffee. There's something so calming about that. And so I love my coffee in the morning, and I don't drink very much coffee. I usually have maybe, you know, 3/4 of a cup every morning. I never really get to finish a whole cup, but that moment where I can sit down and have my coffee in the morning is very special and important to me. So definitely coffee in the morning, but then any other time of the day, it's tea for sure. Tea is soothing and relaxing, and that's usually kind of what I go towards the end of the day, is a good hot cup of tea. At the moment right now, I'm watching this new documentary series called Chef's Table. It's actually not a new series, it's been around for a little while. I think it might have come out last year, but it's called Chef's Table and it's on Netflix. And I love when I'm knitting and I want to watch something. I love to watch podcasts, but I think my number one thing to do while I'm knitting is to watch some kind of a documentary series or a documentary film. Something that will kind of be interesting and expose me to something new, perhaps teach me something. I love documentaries, and so I think that that's probably my go-to when it comes to sitting down and watching something while I'm knitting. And then of course knitting podcasts are always, they always satisfy that, you know, that little niche as well. But I would say documentaries are my number one. And then I love listening to audio podcasts while I'm knitting. I find that my favorite audio podcast is Radiolab. If you're not familiar with Radiolab, definitely check it out. Lots of really interesting content and stories. I also really like Stuff You Missed in History Class. That's a really fun one too. Really interesting content. I listen to the Pom Pom podcast. But yeah, those are just some of my favorites. But right now I'm actually watching, like I mentioned, this series called Chef's Table. And it's so interesting because I'm not really into cooking shows. I mean, I like them, but they're not like my favorite thing to watch. It's not really necessarily because these people are cooking, because I would say that the majority of the show is really more based around their creative process and kind of like their, you know, their process in being like creators, and how they kind of go about their design of their food and their design of their menus. And I think that there's something so interesting in learning about other people's creative processes, and I think that's why I love this show so much, is it's so interesting listening to the way these people are almost obsessive about the craft of like making amazing food. And it's not even just like making amazing food as much as it is creating like art with food, and so it's kind of inspiring. Especially I find that I make a lot of connections to what they're doing and to what I do when I'm dyeing yarn and I'm coming up with new colorways. And though those things are kind of like across from each other quite a bit on the spectrum, they just kind of ring, you know, true to me, like what I see here, and I compare that to like what I do in my dyeing studio. So I don't know, I really dig it. So yeah, it's on Netflix. It's called Chef's Table. If you're into documentaries, or if you like to watch, you know, things about people cooking, this is definitely a cool one. Another really good one that we watched that I really enjoyed was called Mind of a Chef, and that was actually a documentary that was produced for PBS. And it was on PBS for a long time, but now you can watch it on Netflix, and that's excellent as well. I loved that so much. So really great food, you know, themed documentary. A lot of cool insight into the world of food and culinary arts and whatnot. So I think those are my favorite things to do while I'm knitting. right guys, I think that's all I have right now for the Knit Life survey. I'm gonna go ahead and just patch it all together and send it out for you. If I missed anything, I didn't answer every single question, but I answered most of them. So it was really fun doing that and compiling it for you guys. So I hope you enjoy, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.